Hi, I'm John McBay. This presentation will give you an overview of chapters 15 through 30 of the video series Image Editing for Real Estate Photography. The tutorials in this series will show you how to correct common and not so common problems with real estate and architectural images. They'll also demonstrate tips and techniques for getting the most from your images. The series is comprised of more than 70 separate videos covering more than 30 unique editing issues, each and every one focused on helping you produce amazing images. In all, there is more than 40 hours of material. Right now, there are 30 videos for Photoshop users, 29 videos for Elements users, and 12 videos for Lightroom users. All right, so let's get started. Chapter 16 is about lightening or darkening part of an image. So did you ever have an image like this one? Everything in the image is nicely exposed except that bureau on the right over here. In this chapter, you'll learn how to adjust part of an image to make it darker or lighter. And let me just show you how we made that image, that bureau on the right look much better. When you're trying to lighten or darken a portion of the image, no single tool will work the best in all situations. I'll show you a number of different options that you can experiment with to achieve the most pleasing result. Now on this next shot, you can see that the area on the left side of this sofa, this left cushion over here, and the back of that area are overexposed, whereas basically everything else in the image is properly exposed. So unlike with the bureau in the previous image, we don't have a clearly defined area that we can select and adjust the exposure. So I'll show you how to correct problems, lightening and darkening parts of the image when you have a well-defined area like the bureau and also a less well-defined area like this sofa on the left-hand side. And you can see now that the left-hand side is much better looking than it was previously. Chapter 17 is going to teach you about recovering detail and shadow. And if you look at this image, it looks really good as far as exposure goes in the whole image. I mean, everywhere you look, the exposure is perfect, except under the trees and the trees themselves. The shadowed areas underneath the trees are grossly underexposed. So how do you correct that without affecting the parts of the image that are properly exposed? And the way you do it is like this. And this is what it looks like once you've corrected for those shadowed areas. Much better looking, and you'll notice nothing changed in any other part of the image. It's still all perfectly exposed. So this tutorial will show you how to recover detail in areas that are buried deep in shadow or in areas that are darker than you'd like. In the tutorial, I'll demonstrate the superior results that can be attained using the shadow slider in Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw, as opposed to the shadows and highlights tool in the regular Photoshop and Elements workspace. The difference in the results between the two is significant, so much so that I no longer recommend using the shadows and highlights tool at all, or at most in very limited circumstances. So the shadow slider in either Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw is a vast improvement over the old highlights and shadows tool. When I say old, it still exists in Photoshop and Elements, but you'll find most of the time if you're trying to recover detail and shadow that the shadow slider in ACR or Lightroom is much superior to the shadows and highlights tool. This next image was of a very dark living room with an exceedingly bright outdoors behind it. And the living room was dark on purpose. It was decorated that way. It was lit that way. It was just sort of a dark and moody living room, but it was the way that the owners wanted it. But the problem with this image is that there's all kinds of detail that's been lost in the couches here. So using similar techniques to the ones I used on the previous image, without destroying the overall moodiness of the room, if you will, I was able to bring up the detail on the couches so that you can now see them, and it's a much improved picture. For this next image of the piano, this image is underexposed a little bit. It's somewhat flat, and it could definitely use some punch. And as you can see, there are some areas, especially here in the front of the piano, where detail has gone into very deep shadow and has basically been lost. So this is how it looks after I corrected it right now. Let me just tell you what I did. I adjusted the whole image. Next, I used 3 different tools to modify 3 different parts of the picture. I used the adjustment brush for this chair over here. I used the radial filter for the area around the piano. And I used the gradient filter for the right-hand side of the image, which was a little bit darker than the left-hand side of the image. And for all of those tools, I used the shadow slider adjustments in either Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw. The next chapter, chapter 18, will describe how to hide visible supplemental lighting. And supplemental lighting are things like flashes flashing through or into umbrellas, hot lights, whatever source of illumination that's not inherent in the scene is supplemental lighting. This particular chapter will explain what you can do if you are shooting a space and there's no place to hide all of the flashes. So let me just continue on here. For this first image, I was able to hide a flash around the corner to the right and bounce it off a white pantry door. But look at the horrible flash bloom on the top of this stainless steel refrigerator. And additionally, there's a little bit of a harsh triangular shaped shadow up here to the left of the range hood. So what I really needed was to get some light coming from, since this light was coming from right to left, I really needed to get some light coming from left to right. First of all, so I could hopefully get rid of this. Second of all, to deal with this triangular shaped shadow up here. But there really wasn't anywhere over here on the left-hand side that I could hide a light. So what I did was I brought that flash from around the corner from over here and put it over here in clear view and bounced it off of this cabinet here. And you'll notice in doing that, I've gotten rid of the shadow over here, that triangular shaped shadow. And the face of this refrigerator over here is much improved. These squiggly lines here are actually reflections from the window over here on the left. There's really no easy way to get rid of those. So I have my 2 images now, one with the flash on the right, which had been hidden, and the one with the flash on the left where it's in plain view. I took those 2 images, I layered them one on top of the other, and I erased this area over here so you couldn't see that flash which was visible. And now we have a combined image. The refrigerator looks much better, and we got rid of that shadow up there. For this next image, I was upstairs at the top of these stairs, and I needed to light the downstairs. I tried hiding flashes everywhere, around the corner behind the stairs, in these rooms over here, in these rooms over here. I must have spent 20 minutes trying to find a place to hide the flashes. I couldn't find a place where I could hide them where they would properly illuminate the space. So finally what I decided to do was I would take two separate images, one with the flash over here on the right, and then I'd take the exact same image with the flash over here on the left. And then the solution is stack them one on top of another and erase the portions where the flash and the umbrella and the light stand are showing in the top image. And as you can see, you get this very attractive image here, nicely lit down at the bottom of the stairs, and of course, no visible flash anywhere. Chapter 19 will show you how to capture the view outside the window. Let me just back that up for a moment. So it's a great property and the view out the window is spectacular. How do you shoot the image so that the interior is pleasantly lit and the view out the window is clear and properly exposed? I'm going to demonstrate, in the tutorial I demonstrate two completely different techniques, both of which can produce an image with a great window view. For this first image that I'm going to show you, I used a method that's called a luminosity mask. And the advantage to this method is that you can produce a great looking image without necessarily having to create a precise selection of the windows. You can also create a real smooth transition between the interior image and the exterior or view image by blending the two images around the area of the window using this method. So let me just show you the two images that we used to produce the final result. First of all, I shot the interior. I lit it the way I wanted to. I did not care whatsoever what happened out here because I knew there was no way that I could pleasantly light the interior and still capture the exterior. Now let me show you the second image that I took. And for this, the purpose was the exact opposite. I needed to expose so that the area out here was properly exposed. And then what I needed to do is I needed to add enough flash to the interior so that this trim all around these windows was reasonably well lit. And let me just say one thing about the view out the window. This particular house sits right on the Intercoastal Waterway in Savannah, Georgia. And the fact that it sits right on the waterway is probably worth $500,000 to the selling price of this house. So it is very, very important to make sure when you have a house with a view like this, that the view out the window is very clearly shown. You need to work hard to make sure you capture it. All right, so I took those two images and using the luminosity mask method, I combined them to produce this result. And as you can see, the inside is still nice and softly, pleasantly lit, no harsh shadows anywhere, and yet the outside is clearly visible. And I didn't need to make any kinds of selections around these windows whatsoever. The luminosity mask technique allowed me to do this very, very easily. All right, the second technique requires that you create a very accurate selection around the windows. And again, you need two exposures. You need one exposed for the interior, one exposed for the exterior. This is the interior shot. I had to make exacting selections around these windows. For all of these windows, and there were a lot of them, altogether the selection process took in excess of 25 minutes. This is the image for the exterior. No thought was given to the interior whatsoever. And then using the method of creating a very good selection, the two images were combined. Now for both methods, I'll also demonstrate how to modify the brightness or almost any other property of either the interior or the exterior portion of the image after they've been combined. And this is important because it is sometimes difficult to determine exactly how bright the exterior or the interior should be until the two images have been combined. And you'll find in most instances, when you do combine two images using either of these methods, there may be some final adjustment needed. I found that I needed to slightly darken the exterior and slightly lighten the interior in this image. Chapter 20 is eliminating unwanted shadows. So there's shadows everywhere. Some are natural, some of them you created. Which ones need to go and which ones can stay. So let me just show you this first image here. A lot of people shy away from removing shadows. They think it's a really hard thing to do. But it really isn't that difficult in most instances. And it's not that difficult to get rid of most distracting shadows. So we had some severe light spill from a flash that was placed in the kitchen and wasn't appropriately aimed, shall we say. So this is the result after correcting for that shadow or that light spill. And you can see that it's created a completely invisible fix up here. This took less than a minute to correct that light spill, which created a shadow over here. In this image, we have problems with the shadows up here on the ceiling and on the wall from this ceiling fan here. I'll explain the tips and techniques for using the brush tool to paint over shadows on smooth surfaces like ceilings and walls. And I'll also go into detail as to how to use it to create a smooth color and luminosity gradient from one part of the image to the other. So it isn't enough just to paint out the shadows, but you have to make sure that when you've painted them out, that the result looks natural and that there's no evidence left behind of what you've done. So that's the result using the brush tool to paint out those shadows. You'll notice the very natural, subtle shading in the ceiling as it comes down to this slightly darker corner up here. So this looks really very, very natural. Now, if your shadows are on three-dimensional surfaces, your job becomes somewhat more difficult, and it can frequently become very difficult. So I'll demonstrate how to use the clone tool on three-dimensional surfaces like crown molding or carpet and pattern surfaces such as wallpaper. You can't use the brush tools when you're on any of those surfaces. Crown molding, carpet, and patterned wallpaper, you have to use the clone tools. I'll even show you an example where I had to make a copy of a portion of the crown molding, and then I position and distort it to cover a piece of crown molding that's so contaminated with shadows that there is no clean area to clone from. So if you look carefully at this image here, the shadow from this chandelier, first of all, it was very careless in lighting the room to even allow that shadow to be there, but be that as it may, there was a tremendous amount of work that went into eliminating this shadow. Let me just show you what the finished result looks like, and then I'll tell you some of what went into it. The areas that were on the ceiling and on the walls were easily painted out, but there were also shadows that appeared on the crown molding here, the crown molding here. Let me just go backwards for one moment. Take a look at this piece of crown molding here. There was no way that I was going to be able to clone anything onto that crown molding to get rid of those shadows. So ultimately what I ended up doing is taking a piece of the crown molding from over here, copying it, resizing, repositioning it, and replacing it over here with the result that all the shadows are gone. Now, let me just say one more thing. There were also some shadows in the corner of this window frame here. It's probably easier if you look over at this window frame. It's a little larger and it's a little clearer. But if you try to clone anywhere near the corner of a window frame that has any kind of relief or molding or patterning, or whatever this is here, there's a very special technique that you have to use so you don't lose that corner. If you just use regular cloning, you're going to end up losing that corner there. There is a technique, and I show you that technique because there was a little bit of shadow over here on the corner of this window here. So I try to point out how to get rid of shadows no matter what kind of surface they're on. The next chapter, chapter 21, is removing color contamination from stainless steel and actually from other surfaces also. Stainless steel appliances are very popular, but they have an annoying property that shows up in a lot of kitchen images. They tend to reflect the color of the cabinets and or the floor near the appliance itself, and bright overhead lighting will make this problem even worse. So if you take a look at specifically the oven door and the drawer down here, you can see how contaminated they are with color. And that's primarily because there's these bright incandescent lights shining on this oak floor, which gives this orange contamination to the front of the stainless steel. It's a little less prominent on the dishwasher, but it's still there. And there's also some up here on the microwave. So I show you techniques for getting rid of the contamination in stainless steel so your appliances actually look like clean stainless steel appliances. The techniques don't just work on stainless steel. They'll also work on some kinds of hard stone countertops, in this case black granite. And if you look over here, you can see the granite is in fact black. You'd never know it from looking at the top of this table. It is totally color contaminated by reflections off of the yellow walls and some of the other surfaces. So using the same kinds of techniques that I just showed you in the tutorial to clean up saturation on stainless steel appliances also work very well for certain hard stone countertops. They don't work for all of them, but they do work for many. And I explain in the tutorial which ones it'll work for and which ones it won't. Chapter 22 is about painting in what's known as color blend layer mode. And that sounds very complicated, but it's not as complicated as you'd think. So take a look at these kitchen cabinets. If you look down here, this is probably the true color of these cabinets down here, but the top cabinets have been contaminated with a number of different light sources. There's some flash that's shining on these upper portions right here. Flash tends to be bluish, and when you combine the red of the cabinets with the bluish light from the flash, you get purple, and these cabinets are sort of purple. They're certainly not red like they are down here. And over here you have overhead incandescent light shining on, which is yellow, shining on red, and when you mix yellow and red you get orange. And as you can see, we have orange down here in the cabinets. Up here we have yellow in the cabinets. And over here we have a similar problem. There's light coming from a window that's over here on the right hand side. It's daylight, so it's nice and blue. And once again we have purple cabinets. These look purple. They don't look this whatever deep color red that we have down here. All right, so this lesson will show you how to use what's called a color blend layer mode to actually paint color over these cabinets. And the beauty of this technique is that luminosity, which is brightness, and texture is not in any way compromised by painting this way. So as you can see, areas that were brighter previously are still brighter like they were before. You don't want them all to be the same brightness, otherwise it wouldn't look natural. And all the texture that's in the wood is all still visible in the cabinets. You can see it all here. So the nice thing about this technique is it preserves luminosity, texture, and detail. I'll also further show you how to adjust the appearance of the woodwork after you've painted it. It might need to be a little brighter or a little less saturated. Once you've completed the painting, I'll show you some techniques for altering the color or the brightness after the fact. In this next image, it would have been much nicer if the gardener had come and trimmed away these brown palm fronds here. But this is a second-story balcony. There was no way these palm fronds were going away at the time I was taking the picture. So what I did is I used the same color blend layer mode, to paint them green. And the technique is exactly the same as I used to paint the cabinets green. It maintains the texture and the luminosity of the underlying object, so it looks perfectly natural. The next chapter, chapter 23, deals with dealing with glare on reflective surfaces. An unwanted glare can ruin an otherwise perfectly good image or make it look less than appealing. The video in this chapter will demonstrate a number of different techniques for diminishing or eliminating glare. And so for this first image, the reflected glare off of the smoked black glass tabletop really detracts from this otherwise appealing image. So drastic measures were called for. The windows didn't have drapes, shades, shutters, or anything else that would block out some of the light, which is what I would normally do, and take a second image and then combine the two together. So in this case, I hung up some black cloth and took a second image. And then what I was able to do was combine the two images together and produce this result. And as you can see, we have a really nice looking black glass tabletop here. I'll also show you an alternative technique that happens to work for this table that does not require the black cloth, but it's only going to work for a table of this type. In the next image I'm going to show you here, the reflection of these under cabinet lights is really distracting, and it's detracting from the image itself. Additionally, and this has nothing to do with what this chapter is about, but sometimes I throw in a little lesson, even if it's not on the subject matter that's in the chapter itself. These lights, these under cabinet lights here, I think are actually a little bit too bright. So the way I handled the problem is I took this image here, and then I shut off all of those under cabinet lights. Now what that gives me is a nice clean piece of black granite over here. And it also gives me this area under here where there is no light showing. And then what I was able to do is combine the two images together. I was then able to erase the reflection from here, and I end up with a nice clean black granite surface. And at the same time, I blended the two images together to get some of this light underneath the cabinets, but I was able to diminish it probably by 30 or 40%, so it wasn't quite as harsh. The next chapter, chapter 24, deals with decreasing the intensity of hotspots. So if you look at this image, you can see that there are horrible hotspots above, below these two lamps, and also up onto the ceiling. In this tutorial, I'll show you two different ways to get rid of them. The first technique uses two images, one taken with the lights on, another one taken with the lights off, and then the two images are combined to produce this here. And the beauty of this technique is that you can control how much hotspot you do or don't want. So you can make it so that just the lamp shades are glowing and there's no hotspot whatsoever. Or like I did here, you can make the lamp shades glow and allow a little bit of the hotspot to show. But the technique that I show you allows you to exactly control how much of that hotspot you want to allow to appear on the wall. For the next image, a different technique was required. And this one uses a single image to tone down these hot spots from these overhead lights over the top of this bed. This second technique will only work on a painted wall or a ceiling. It would not work in the previous example where we have pictures and textured wallpaper and all kinds of other stuff. You couldn't use the second technique for this image, but we can use it for this image coming up right now. And the technique allows you, as the previous one did, to control exactly how much hotspot you want to have visible at the end. So you can control exactly how much you can see up here on the wall. Chapter 25 will teach you how to insert a fire into a fireplace. This video will show you how to realistically insert a fire into a fireplace. I'll explain techniques for shooting real fires that you can use later on to insert a fire into a fireplace. And if you don't have any fire images of your own, I'll show you where to obtain them. So I'm going to show you 3 different fireplace problems, and they're all a little bit different, but all of them result in an extremely realistic looking fire. So on this first fireplace here, you'll notice that there's a glass cover, is a glass piece of glass on the front of the fireplace. And you can see these reflections here from light in the room. So there's 2 ways we can handle inserting a fire into this kind of fireplace. We can put a fire in there and not have the glass show at all. So it just basically looks like an open firebox with a fire in there. But we can take the technique a step further and actually put the fire behind that piece of glass. And this is what it looks like after the fire has been inserted. So if you look carefully, you can see we've got a nice looking fire in there, and you can still see these natural reflections off of the glass. So we've got the best of both worlds. We've got a fire in there, and we've got the glass still covering the front of it, so it looks more realistic. The next fireplace that needed a fire put into it was a little bit different. Instead of a piece of glass, this one has a steel mesh spark screen. I don't know if that's what you call it, but that's what I call it. So again, you could throw a fire in there and leave it at that. But if you take the technique just a little bit further, what you can do is you can actually put the fire behind that screen. So here's the fire inserted in the fireplace. Very realistic looking fire. And as you can see, you can still see the folds, the natural folds in the spark screen here. So both of these techniques give you a really realistic looking fire. In this third one that I'm going to show you right now, it's a slightly different problem in that you've got this open fireplace. You want to insert a fire in there, but it's important that the fire is clearly visible, but you don't want to have the portions of the brick inside this fireplace obscured by information, if you will, that was part of the original fire picture. So using basically the same technique as I used for the other two images, I'm able to throw a fire into the fireplace and just have the portions of the fire that I want visible showing. And just so you understand, there is no kind of selection required whatsoever for either this or the other two fires that were inserted. There's no selections whatsoever. It's a relatively easy technique. It only takes a few minutes, usually less than 5 minutes, to insert a very realistic fire into a fireplace and maintain the natural appearance of the fireplace itself. Sort of similar to inserting a fire into a fireplace, Chapter 26 will teach you how to insert an image onto a blank TV screen. And this chapter demonstrates how to fill that gaping black hole on the wall that is otherwise known as a flat panel television screen. So this is how the image looked before the scenic shot was inserted into the TV. And I'd like you to take close notice of these natural reflections. This is of a window, and there's two reflections of lamps that were turned on. Those are going to be important in just a moment. So this is the image, the outside of the house that I decided I wanted to insert onto the TV screen. And you don't have to use the outside of the house. You can use a picture of a golf course or something scenic, the Grand Canyon. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't have to be this house or a house. The technique is exactly the same no matter which you use. And then I show you how to reposition, resize, distort, and have the image look very natural on the TV screen. But I don't stop there. I'll also show you two techniques that produce subtle effects that make the TV and the image look even more natural. The first technique inserts a very subtle drop shadow along two sides of the black frame. The second technique allows naturally occurring reflections to show through the inserted image. And additionally, I'll show you how to increase or decrease the intensity of those reflections so that they don't overpower the inserted image. So you remember back at the beginning when I showed you the natural reflections on the TV screen? There was a window, which you can see a little bit of here, and then there were two lamps that were both orange. Well, they're both barely visible, and the window's a little bit more visible, but these natural reflections make this image, this inserted image, look like this image was actually being projected from the TV screen in real time. The reflections make it look much more natural. Chapter 27 will deal with shooting straight into a mirror. Sometimes the only available shot has a reflection of the camera in the mirror, and sometimes the best shot requires that you shoot straight into a mirror. So in this lesson, I'll explain in detail how to shoot the two images so that you'll be sure to have all the image information you need to hide the reflection of the camera and the tripod in the mirror. So this is the into the mirror shot. We've got to replace the area around the camera here, including the camera itself, of course. So I explained to you how to take the reverse image, and this is the image looking back into the bedroom that we're going to use to replace the area around the camera. I teach you how to flip it horizontally, because remember, you're looking at it in a mirror. And I teach you how to select, resize, reposition, distort, whatever you have to do to the image to make it so that it fits exactly where it belongs in the image looking into the mirror. Additionally, you'll learn how to clean up any remaining ragged edges that exist between the original and the inserted images. And this, of course, is the final result that you're looking at here. Chapter 28 is about fixing broken blinds and shutters. And no, it's not a chapter about camera repair. Sometimes you encounter a room that has a broken Venetian blind or shade like this room does. This lesson will show you how to copy, resize, distort, and reposition a portion of a nearby blind to fix the broken blind, like this here. Additionally, when you fix the broken blind, you have to insert something outside this window here. Let me just show you what I mean. I'll back up for a moment. Once you get rid of this portion down here, you've got to insert something out there. So in the tutorial, we'll talk somewhat at length about how you can choose or what you should choose to insert out there and how to make it look as natural as possible. In this next example, this is the outside of a building, and this is the building that I was shooting right here. And as you can see, this storm shutter up here has blown closed. There was no way to access it from the inside. There was a large bureau right in front of the window. There was no way of getting it at it from the outside. But fortunately, using the exact same techniques that I used for the Venetian blind in the previous image, I was able to copy a portion of this window and this blind over here and reposition, distort, resize, whatever needs to be done. So ultimately it ended up looking like this. And as you can see, nobody would ever be able to tell that that shutter had been broken in any way whatsoever. This technique works really well when you get home from the photo shoot and discover that you forgot to remove the realtor's sign from the living room window. Chapter 29 will describe to you how to eliminate dangling cords. And why anyone would leave this mess visible is beyond me, but unfortunately I had to clean it up. So dangling wires and cords have become a much greater problem with the prevalence of computers and flat screen TVs. So when I cleaned it up, this is what it ended up looking like. You might be inclined to just unplug some of the electronics, shoot, and then reattach the cords. And I would recommend that you not do this unless the item you're unplugging is something innocuous like a lamp. If you unplug a computer that's in the middle of defragmenting a disk, or a cable box that is recording someone's favorite television show, or a home phone system, you could create big problems. So if you can get the homeowner to unplug them for you, that's fine, but I wouldn't do it yourself. And this removing cords depends on the surface that the cords dangle in front of. So in this tutorial, I'll demonstrate how to make cords disappear, but you have to understand that different techniques are required when the cords dangle in front of a wall as opposed to when they're in front of decorative molding or carpet or, the worst of all, patterned wallpaper. And I'll show you how to eliminate cords in all of these instances. So here, this becomes very tough. But I was able to successfully eliminate this dangling cord. And as you can see, the result looks really good. I didn't bother to get rid of this tiny little label over here. I guess I could have done that also, but the cord itself was the big problem. Chapter 30 is not really an editing issue. It's more of a technique issue, and it's called Flash Ambient Hybrid Blending. So if you take a look at this image, the yellow light from the two lamps and the ceiling fixtures at the far end of the room is drowning that end of the room in a yellow color cast. One technique or one solution to tame that yellow contamination is to take a second image with a lot more flash and at a higher shutter speed, like this here. You notice how flat the lighting is, and then blend the two images together like this. And you'll notice that in blending the images together, you can control how much of the glow around these lamps you want to maintain, how much you want to get rid of. This tutorial will explain how to make the two images, and how to blend them. It demonstrates how to adjust the blending to achieve just the amount of visual warmth that you want to leave in the image. This technique can also help tame blown out light fixtures, and additionally helps with preserving the view out the window. Okay, this has been the chapters 16 through 30 overview of the video series Image Editing for Real Estate Photography. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you in the editing section.